Donkey Kong. In 1981, he was Nintendo's #1 mascot, until Jumpman, aka Mario, took him down and stole his spotlight. Since then, nobody gave a crap about him until Sega began the rivalry with Nintendo. Sega was winning the 18-bit war, and Nintendo was crawling back to Donkey Kong pleading for help. This was the biggest comeback a video game character has ever had. A comeback that will teach all developers that you don't need an add-on to make graphics and gameplay. This is a game that saved Super Nintendo from losing the competition with Sega. On 1994, Donkey Kong Country was released and made history. Back in 1994, as a kid, I was blown away by the graphics and design of the game. And to this day of gaming, that feeling I had when I was a kid has never worn off. Nintendo and Rare took financial risk to make this game good, and you know what? The graphics, gameplay, soundtrack, and design is not only the best for its time, but probably the best in video game history. I absolutely love all the characters, especially Donkey and Diddy Kong. Donkey Kong. Even though he's slower, he can kill enemies that Diddy can't, and Diddy is faster and agile than DK himself. Since they have their pros and cons, what made it also great is that you can play both of those characters and switch them, which makes the balance of the gameplay great. Also, when you get hit by an enemy or a deadly object, you can lose one of those characters and use the remaining character to find the other one in those DK barrels to bring back the character. The controls are fantastic. It's really smooth, responsive, and perfect, especially for a side-scroller. There are very memorable levels that will always be in many gamers' hearts. The one thing I will always remember is how magical the water levels are and how groundbreaking the very first level is, like a Saturday morning cartoon special. But what I really like about this Super Nintendo game that others did not have is that it was so easy to get so many continues. The game could get really challenging and sometimes very hard, and to have that ability to find all those continues very easily makes the game very well balanced. But the game is far from perfect. There are a lot of negative parts I feel about the game. First of all, I have to agree with many people who had some complaints about the game. For one, those barrel cannons. It's okay, but in all honesty, it gets overused and frustrating at times. Believe me, there are a lot of barrel cannons to end up to, and Rare did their very best to make sure that it wasn't going to be easy to get from point A to point B. There are way too many barrels in this game, and it gets way overused. I don't mind challenge, but come on, it's like they ran out of ideas to make things challenging, so they had to put out this. There are plenty of stages that had so many barrels to get through, and it gets so annoying. Speaking of levels, my least favorite level of the game has to be that factory level when it switches the lights on and off at random. Another one, I had to ride on that platform thingy to collect those fuels to keep it going, and any of those levels that has too many of those fucking barrels. My final complaint with the game is that Spo the Ostrich. Out of all the animals you can ride, Spo, despite his or her speed and the ability to glide, is completely useless. This ostrich can't even hit an enemy, so what's the purpose of this dumb bird? Also, when you ride on any one of those animal friends, why can't you keep them on the next level? Just how did they disappear when you ride on them and get on the next level? With all the negatives out of the way, I have to say with all the positives already been mentioned, there isn't much about Donkey Kong Country that hasn't already been said. The legacy of this classic lives on in many players' hearts. Everyone who played this game has at least one favorite thing about the game. Everything from graphics, soundtrack, design, and so much more is what made this game one of the best Super Nintendo games ever. Donkey Kong Country made Sega Genesis add-ons look more like a whimper, showing that you don't need add-ons to make graphics. This is the very game that saved Super Nintendo from losing competition to the Sega Genesis, and made the SNES the king of the 16-bit era. This is a true video game classic. That's why I give Donkey Kong Country a 5 fingers out of 5. Okay, what's next on the list? Wow, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest. A year after the epic success of Donkey Kong Country, the sequel was released. Instead of getting your bananas back from King K. Rool from the original, this time your pal Donkey Kong is kidnapped, which leaves Diddy to rescue him. Wait a minute, what kind of DK game is without a partner? Enter Dixie Kong, also known as Diddy's girlfriend. Dixie proves herself a worthy partner because she not only has every positive parts about Diddy has in the first installment of the game, but she also can use her long hair to glide and slowly descend, which proves to be very useful. Also new to the series that you can carry your partner and throw them into the direction you want or use them to hit enemies. Despite using the same engine as its predecessor, Donkey Kong Country 2 is a very different experience by comparing the original Donkey Kong Country. The original had a great jungle feel, and Donkey Kong Country 2 on the other hand has a pirate theme. This game is just like its predecessor, getting from point A to point B, but only this time there are more secrets, more collectibles, and so much more. This game is more than just getting to point B. You have to collect DK coins as in every level and sometimes very hard to find, and bonus coins, which can be found in bonus barrels, which leads you to a bonus stage. You don't have to collect them, but if you want to make 102% completion, you better collect them all. By the way, those bonus coins, they are used to get access to the Lost World, which puts you to those extra levels and to see the real ending of the game. The problems I have for the original still prevails in the sequel, but I got more complaints to add. There are way too many things to collect, and sometimes finding those secrets are hard to find because the graphics are so good you can't even tell whether or not if it's a wall or a background. This gets frustrating when you're trying to collect everything from the game and going back and forth to find what you missed. Other than that, that's all I got to say. For the positive parts, they are my favorite part of the game. For one, the graphics have greatly improved. Even to this day, the graphics and designs is probably the best in video game period. Like what I said, it's hard to tell if some of the parts of the level is background or a fake wall. The effects and animation that are put in this game is just what makes the game very mesmerizing. The background is constantly moving like a film, and there are fireworks, molten lava, and so much more that's constantly moving. The boss battles are so much better and more memorable than the first game. I'm not going to pretend that I was in shock to see Clever Kim when that sword popped out of the lava. These bosses look more epic, more appealing, and more threatening than all the bosses from the first game. What I really like about Donkey Kong Country 2 is that they have the best selection of animal buddies to ride on and keep the best ones from the first game, On Guard and Rambi. The best new animal buddy in my opinion is Squitter the Spider because he was just amazing. Shooting and making webs add more to the gameplay than all the animal buddies combined. But that's not the best part of the game. The best part of the entire game has to be the soundtrack because it's far better and more epic than the first game of the series. Seriously, there are people out there who are still playing and listening to the magical soundtrack of this game. Who can argue that any of these songs are bad? You know what? There is no argument. The music has a lot of power, emotion, and a lot of echo. This is something that music in games does not have anymore. When I find somebody who talks about the Donkey Kong Country series, they often say that the first one is the best, and I do wonder if they pay attention on how the second installment of the series actually is. Same way how I feel about Spyro 2 when they say the first game of the Spyro series is the best. I don't know, probably because the original had more wow factor than Donkey Kong Country 2. But that's besides the point. From designs, controls, gameplay, and soundtrack sums it up to one of the best gaming experience from a 2D side-scroller. Donkey Kong Country 2 is one of the best games I ever played in my life. It's just a complete magical feeling every time I play the game. The character designs reminds me of old school Nickelodeon. The background made me think of an amusement park, and the soundtrack is incomparable with anything I've ever listened to. This game will always age well in my book and is always replayable. That's why I give this game a 5. Wait a minute, only 5? With everything I said, only 5? Okay, for the first time ever on YouTube, I give this game a 6 fingers out of 5. That's right, I rank this up to the level where Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is in. Seriously, I don't give the word greatest lightly to anything, and Donkey Kong Country 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. Man, with 2 phenomenal installments of the series, I can hardly wait for Donkey Kong Country 3. What's it gonna be like? Are we gonna have Donkey Kong again? Are we gonna play all 3 of the characters, DK, Diddy, and Dixie at one time? I can't wait for the 3rd game of the series. What's gonna happen? Wait, what? What? Who the heck is this fuzzball? Kiddy Kong? What the hell? Where's Donkey Kong and Diddy? Where the hell did they go? Lost in a fishing trip and Dixie has to find them? That's bullshit! How is it even called Donkey Kong Country 3 if they don't have Donkey Kong in it? How dare they take DK and Diddy off as playable characters? How dare they make the character models crappy compared to the other 2 games? How dare they not make the soundtrack so epic? How dare they took off Rambi and replace him with this elephant? How dare they make Kiddy Kong's gameplay pathetic compared to Donkey Kong's gameplay? Rare, how could you make the 3rd sequel nowhere good as the 1st and the 2nd? How could you? How could you? How could you? Okay, after finishing everything I disliked about the game and overreacted in an immature manner, okay, let's talk about the positives. Don't get me wrong, it's a good game. I have to admit that the graphics and the designs is the best of the series. The stuff like the waterfall effects is really great to look at. Like all Donkey Kong Country themes, Donkey Kong Country 3, it's a mix between mechanical themes and southern country themes. With all honesty, the designs kinda remind me of Myst. Anyway, DKC3 brought back everything that most people loved about the first game, a casual platforming with some challenge. The boss fights are more interesting than all the other ones in the series, but not as epic as DKC2. It's a great game, but with all honesty, it's not as good as DKC or DKC2. One of the main reasons why it failed is because it did not have that wow factor that the original one had. Also, it was released on the same year that Nintendo 64 was released. Since they didn't change too much of the game, but put a lot of features in it, I have to give this game a 5 fingers out of 5. It's not the best, but one hell of a good game.